Well, here we are at the studio at the Durden Hall, and we're with Sean Cruzen, who is here to talk about space. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike. Good to be with you again today.
Okay, we have a lot of things to talk about today. I saw this list when you brought it in. It's quite a few things going on, and there's a special announcement that we get to talk about a little later on in the show, so people should really kind of stay tuned for that. Very exciting news coming for us here close to home. So, Sean, tell us a little bit about what's going on.
Well, you know, it's been a busy week in space. There's all kinds of things happening right now, and one of those things is the successful launch of the Space Shuttle Endeavour. And today, the Space Shuttle is actually docked with the International Space Station in orbit around the Earth, and the astronauts are doing spacewalks to do various repairs and upgrades to our space station up there in space. And of course, people may know this, but they've taken a couple of pieces of cargo up in the shuttle with them. Two of those pieces are actually add-ons to the space station itself, so that they're going to be adding on 2 new rooms, as it were, to the International Space Station. One of those rooms is called the Tranquility Module, which is kind of it's a living space. It's going to increase the interior room of the International Space Station and some of the laboratory experiments and things like that can be done also with that. Another portion is called the portico, and it actually is an observing area. And so there are windows that are built into the side of this module that will go onto the space station that will allow the astronauts to actually walk out and get a great panoramic view of the planet Earth from the International Space Station.
Oh, so this is like adding a deck onto your house.
It's very much like that.
Okay.
It's very much like almost like a front porch, as it were, so they can sit out there and look out over the Earth. And really, it's kind of an important add-on, because it is a connector. It's a connector between modules, but also it does allow those astronauts to have that kind of real contact, as it were, with the planet that they're orbiting, so they can get out there and actually see the planet in a more convenient way than from any other place on the space station, and photograph what's happening on the planet below from that portico.
Well, I'm going to have to save up my money. I need one of those Russian spaceships to get me up there so I can take a look off of that thing. I only need, what, 20 million?
Yeah, it's a bit more than that, actually. So they've been charging space tourists a little bit less than what they actually charge NASA astronauts, and that's been true for a while. So NASA pays for rides on the Soyuz spacecraft when it goes up, and astronauts from NASA ride that particular rocket. They pay about $51 million, and
wow.
So that's all, right? So that's all you need to get a ride on the Soyuz, about 51 mil. Now they're contracted with the Russian space program to keep that price in place through the year 2012. However, the Russians have announced that now that America's announced that they're kind of closing down NASA's end of human space transport and shifting that over to the private sector, which will take quite a bit of time. In other words, America's going to be out of the business of taking astronauts back and forth to space.
Right. Remember you talking about that last couple of weeks now.
Exactly. The Russians are going to increase their prices.
Aha.
So they didn't used to be into capitalism, but apparently they found that capitalism can be to their benefit at certain times. So after the year 2012, the Russians, a ride on a Russian rocket for a NASA astronaut is going to go up to some unspecified amount, well beyond the $51 million price tag that they're going to be charging right now.
It's becoming a real private sector business economy model that they're working from. So yeah, prices are going to go up at this point, right?
I mean, it's just kind of a natural thing with any kind of market. If you own the corner on the market, if you're the one ride to space, then you're going to be able to raise prices on that ticket a little bit, and that's exactly what the Russians are going to be doing. So.
Okay, what else, Sean?
You know, there's a neat announcement that came out within the last 48 hours, and that's that the Cassini spacecraft, which has been in orbit around the planet Saturn, has been able to grab some very neat photographs of one of the moons of Saturn, and that moon is called Enceladus. Now, that sounds like something off the buffet line. The Enceladus moon, though, is one of the moons that they've suspected for a long time may have water on it. And so this moon on the planet Saturn, they've actually got recent data that does confirm that there are likely liquid water oceans on the surface of this, or under the surface of this moon, I should say. So frozen ice on top, liquid water oceans underneath. Now, the thing that makes that so interesting is that makes that moon of Saturn one of now only 3 sites where it's suspected that this weird stuff called liquid water exists. And I say that to point out the fact that people don't realize that all across the universe, anywhere throughout the solar system or throughout the universe, water in a liquid form is actually an extremely rare substance. There's only a very narrow range of temperatures and pressures under which the water can be a liquid. Now, of course, liquid water is necessary to support life. And so the flip side of that is this. Everywhere, and I do mean everywhere, that we've been able to sample liquid water, we've also found life. Now, so far, that sampling has all happened on the surface of the Earth, or under the surface, I should say, maybe in the oceans, things like that. It's never happened on another world. But now the planet Io, the moon Io around the planet Jupiter,
right,
and now this new moon Enceladus around the planet Saturn, we have very strong evidence of both of those moons having substantial amounts of liquid water below their surfaces. They may both be a site or a location where testing for life is something that would be a very, very good thing to do for humankind in the future if we want to find life beyond the Earth. And so
right.
that's very exciting news from the Cassini spacecraft.
Sounds like it. And so there's water at least underneath the surface. What about on the surface?
Yeah, on the surface it's so cold that any liquid water would be frozen.
Right.
So
It'd be icy.
So it'd be an icy, kind of an icy crust, liquid water down then below that icy crust in a form of an ocean. So we're not talking about small deposits of water. We're actually talking about very substantial deposits of liquid water below the icy crusts of both of those moons, one around Jupiter and now one around Saturn as well. So
wow,
interesting stuff.
All right, what else?
Another fun thing today. Today a rocket was launched that's carrying a new probe into outer space. The probe is called the SDO, that stands for Solar Dynamics Observatory. The SDO was launched off an Atlas rocket today from the Kennedy Space Center. We actually watched that on the big screen at the Coca-Cola Space Science Center today. So anybody who was around at the Space Science Center got a chance to go to the back of our lobby and watch as this new observatory mission launched from the Kennedy Space Center on an Atlas rocket and put the satellite, it's on its way now to going into a geostationary orbit above the surface of the Earth, where that satellite will then monitor the sun 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the cool thing about this, the way it was described, is that the cameras on this particular mission are so sensitive that it's going to be providing basically a high definition or an HD view of the sun. And the probe will be downloading enough data down to the surface of the Earth that it's equivalent to about 500,000 songs. If you were downloading songs on your iPod, think about 500,000 songs worth of download data per day coming down from these high definition cameras on this new solar satellite, photographing the sun continuously.
That's going to be fascinating. I imagine the quality of those pictures are great. Is it video? Or still pictures?
They'll be coming down in the form of still pictures that can be assembled into videos and animations and things like that.
Like frames in a video.
Exactly. So there'll be individual video frames, each at high definition. It's going to provide an absolutely phenomenal new look at the surface of the sun. But more than that, beyond that, it's going to allow solar scientists to be able to watch the subtle effects that are associated with storms on the surface of the sun caused by the sun's magnetic field. And these are all tied to sunspot phenomenon and solar flare phenomenon, which can result in these things called a CME, a coronal mass ejection, which is a bunch of material being shot off the surface of the sun. Sometimes that material streams past the Earth and causes problems right here on the Earth. It can actually knock out radio and television communications. It can actually knock out power. It can cause a variety of problems for all kinds of electronics here on the surface of the Earth. It can also be a very big hazard to any astronauts who might be somewhere like the International Space Station, or if we ever did have astronauts either on the moon or Mars, things like that. So all of these hazards need to be monitored. This new satellite would provide us a very high-definition monitoring system, but also be able to allow scientists to analyze more closely the dynamics taking place on the surface of the sun so that they might be able to predict when these severe solar storms may happen and get out kind of a more early warning to all the people that need to shut down satellites or monitor power grids and things like that.
Forgive this question, but those solar storms, have they ever been aimed at Earth? Have we just received them head on? Has that happened?
Yeah, in fact, most people don't realize this, but they happen all the time. And the sun actually goes through an 11-year cycle where it's very active and then it calms down and then it gets very active again. The span of that cycle being about 11 years. Right now we're kind of toward the bottom of that. We're just coming out of a time that we called solar minimum. But back in the years 2000 through about 2003, the sun was incredibly active. Many very large storms that erupt on the surface of the sun. We had our solar observatory at the Space Science Center monitoring the sun all throughout that time. And right now we actually have students working on a project to assemble an archive where people are going to be able to log on to our site and go back and look at all the animations and images that we gathered during that solar maximum period on the sun.
And now I'm assuming that there were events that may have taken place during those storms when they impacted Earth, and maybe there were some power disruptions and other things that you...
There were. In fact, there was a particularly active period in the year 2003 where some very large storms moved across the surface of the sun. We happened to capture the 10th most powerful flare in recorded history at the Space Science Center. So we were actually imaging that day, and we caught a time-lapse sequence of this flare going off and taking place. And that same flare caused power outages in parts of Africa and actually disabled and damaged a satellite that was in orbit around the Earth. And so those were kind of some real-world consequences of that particular solar storm that we happened to capture on our imaging at the Space Science Center.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, and you have the equipment there to do that. It's amazing right here. Pretty amazing. Sean, what else is going on in the news?
You know, another thing that was released, there was a very beautiful image released of the Orion Nebula. And the Orion Nebula it's a birthplace for stars. It's a cloud in outer space. It's a cloud of hydrogen gas. As people might know, most stars are mostly made out of this gas called hydrogen. It's the simplest gas that is out there in the universe. It's also the most abundant. And sometimes when stars are formed within these clouds, they will heat up enough that their energy will light up the whole cloud. Well, what people know is the Orion constellation holds one of these nebulae, and we know it as the Great Nebula of Orion, and a lot of people can see it through backyard telescopes and things. Well, probably one of the most detailed and beautiful photographs of the Orion Nebula was just released from a telescope that's run by the European Southern Observatory. We call them ESO. It's down in Chile, and this is a combination of both visible light and infrared light, or kind of a heat sensor.
It's a magnificent photo.
It is an absolutely beautiful photograph of the Orion Nebula. You can see in exquisite detail within this. If people want to see this image is actually linked right now to the website space.com. So if you go on space.com, www.space.com, you can log on and actually see this image. They have it on their website. But something that's also kind of interesting is this very same observatory from where this photograph was taken was the site for the shooting of a very famous movie. In fact, it was the last James Bond movie called Quantum of Solace. And at the very end of the Quantum of Solace movie, if you've watched that movie,
yes,
there's a very action-packed scene that happens in this, almost looks like a hotel sitting out in the middle of the desert, out in the middle of nowhere. And you think, well, that's a very elaborate movie set. And in fact, it's not really a movie set. It's actually the residence for the observatory on top of this very high mountain in Chile, where they have the Paranal Observatory for ESO, and where these pictures of the Orion Nebula were taken. So when you look at this neat image of the Orion Nebula, think James Bond. You might want to think about the Quantum of Solace movie there. So
I tell you what, just looking at that, I mean, it's a magnificent photograph and gives you just the idea of the enormity of our universe.
It's very true, and the Orion Nebula, again, is one of the more famous objects. A lot of people who look through amateur telescopes are very familiar with this object. This is also one of the objects that we can see when we take you out on an astronomy night, as we have one coming up here in the near future.
Oh, we're going to talk about that a little bit later on.
That's right.
So,
yep,
okay. Yep. Well, thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome. No problem. So we're going to talk about it now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we do have. We'll jump right into it then. We have an astronomy night coming. It's down at Providence Canyon State Park. It's going to be this Saturday night. Now, and again, if you haven't made your Valentine's Day plans, time is running out. Time is seriously running out as we go into the weekend of Valentine's Day. But there's one last hope for you for a romantic date for two, or however many you want to bring. You can bring the family on down to the Providence Canyon State Park, where we're going to be setting up our telescopes down there and taking a look at the nighttime sky. And the the Orion Nebula is one of the targets that we're going to be pointing our telescopes at as we're down there. Great thing about Providence, it's well out away from the city lights. It's one of the darkest sites that we take our telescopes to. Yeah, there could be some bad weather coming in on Friday, but it looks like that's going to move out by Saturday night. And a lot of times after these storms go through, the sky is particularly clear. And so it's a particularly good time to take telescopes out and look at the sky.
Tell us a little bit about what happens at night. Let's say we're a family out here in this area and we're interested in coming. What should we do, and how long? What can we expect if we go down? Do we just meet you down there? How does that go?
It's a whole program, and here's how it starts out. Right down there at Providence Canyon State Park, we're actually going to set up several chairs and a big screen, and we're going to, as the sky is getting dark, starting at about 7 p.m., we're going to have a little bit of a talk, and that is going to tell you about what objects are in the nighttime sky, how to look at those objects yourself, where you can look and see satellites and other things like that moving by. Talk a little bit about what constellations are going to be visible in the nighttime sky. So that's going to go for maybe 15, 20 minutes, and we'll do that as the sky is getting dark. So you'll get an idea about what kind of objects and targets we're going to be pointing our telescopes at. And then as soon as the sky starts getting dark, provided it's clear, we're going to move everybody over to the telescopes, and we're going to let them have a look at the nighttime sky with their very own eye. And now they'll have an expectation about what they should be seeing from the photographs that we're going to show in that talk. Excellent. But there's nothing like being able to see those objects with your own eye. And if you're trying to inspire your kids into exploring science, engineering, mathematics, those kinds of fields, there's nothing better to get them involved with that than to have one of these real-world kind of experiences where they're encountering the universe on a one-to-one basis with a telescope. So,
okay, so what time should we be there?
7 o'clock is our start time. That's the time. It's a little bit before it's completely dark, but that's the time we're going to start our presentation ahead of time. If you can't quite make that for some reason, go ahead and come on down a few minutes late because after that talk, then we'll be moving to the telescopes. You can still make the telescope portion of the evening, and we'll be down there providing the sky is clear for maybe a couple of hours after that. And
so, and I'm sure there are going to be signs there for directing people to.
Yeah, fortunately enough, at Providence Canyon, it's really a no-brainer because right at the parking area, all you have to do is park the car, walk through the gate, and we're right there. You'll see the big crowd. You see the big white astronomy van from the Coca-Cola Space Science Center. The mobile astronomy vehicle will be sitting there. Astro 1, as we like to call it sometimes. We'll be sitting there.
Astro 1. Astro 1.
Astro 1. That's right. Okay. There's not really an Astro 2, but we just like to call it Astro 1 anyway. So Astro 1 will be parked right there. You'll definitely see where we're observing down in Providence.
Excellent, excellent. I look forward to it. Okay, we can't go any further. We have to talk now about some exciting news coming to the Coca-Cola Space Science Center. Sean, tell us what's going on.
Okay, we had a very big internal announcement at the end of last week, and we've kind of been going through some procedures to get ready to announce it to the rest of the community. But now it's kind of out there, and so we're putting out press releases now. Some very exciting news for the history of Space Science Center, also the history of Columbus. The Coca-Cola Space Science Center at Columbus State University has been awarded $17 million worth of NASA artifacts that are coming from the shuttle program at its closing at the end of this year. So at the first part of next year, we'll receive these artifacts for permanent display.
Permanent display
at Columbus State University's Coca-Cola Space Science Center. So we're extremely excited about that. You know, we've always been a hands-on science museum facility where people can come down and do activities and have real-world experiences with astronomy, see great shows in our planetarium. But this is really going to change our mission a little bit now, because we're going to actually be a facility that houses genuine artifacts from the space program, and we're getting some very, very good ones. And the one I'd like to tell you
a little bit about those.
I'd be happy to. The one I want to tell you most about is we're actually going to receive an engine nozzle, one of the main engine nozzles from the space shuttle. And so this engine nozzle, if you think about the shuttle launching and you see fire coming out the back end of that thing, that nozzle is where the energy is being output from the space shuttle's main engine. The nozzle that you're seeing behind me here, it's kind of a side view, but the thing is it's 10 feet long, and if you can tell, it's round, and so in diameter, it's 8 feet in diameter.
Oh, you're going to have to build another building onto the Coca-Cola Center to get that thing.
We're going to be very creative about how we'd end up displaying all these items inside the Space Science Center. But that's certainly the main piece right there.
Wow.
That shuttle engine nozzle, and so it weighs over 2 tons. It's really kind of an amazing artifact. But the neat thing about it is having that genuine article sitting right there in our lobby. What better way to inspire inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers right here at Columbus State University, and to recruit students into our Earth and Space Sciences program and also into our pre-engineering program at CSU, than to bring them down and to show them these actual artifacts and the amazing engineering that has to go into making the shuttle fly. People may not realize this, but the space shuttle is the most complex machine ever devised by human beings and ever built by human beings. It's an amazingly complicated machine. So every time you see a successful flight of the space shuttle, understand that the most complicated machine that has ever been built had another successful run. And so it's an incredible feat of engineering.
And a big piece of it is going to be right here in Columbus, Georgia.
And in fact, we're going to get a total of 5 pieces of the orbiter itself. And so that was one of them. Another thing we're going to get is a section of the leading edge of the shuttle's wing. Now, I have to admit right now, we're still checking into how much of the wing we're going to get. We don't really even know that.
Well, that's another big piece.
It's another very big piece, because the entire wing is actually 49 feet long, across the diagonal. And we're getting the leading edge of that wing. We don't know we know it comes in sections. We don't know if we're getting one section or multiple sections. We're still checking into that. It's not clear, but for sure, a very historic part of the shuttle program, because many people may know that that's actually the part that failed on the orbiter Columbia when it was coming back in, and led to one of the 2 shuttle disasters that happened. And so it's one of the pieces of the shuttle that's been under the most engineering scrutiny since that accident of Columbia. And every time it goes up now, they're taking a very close look at that part of the wing, so they can identify if there's any foam that came down and hit that and did any kind of damage to the leading edge of the orbiter, because that's the most vulnerable portion when it's coming back in from its descent from space. So we're getting that piece. We're actually getting a tire, the front tire of the space shuttle. We're going to have the front tire of the space shuttle sitting in the lobby. We're also getting a section of the orbiter's window area, and so we'll be able to see what the actual window area looks like.
All right.
And we're getting an onboard computer, one of the onboard computer systems that helps to power and control the space shuttle as well. So very exciting things. We're also going to get one of the desks at the firing room, the actual firing room, where they launched the space shuttle down at Kennedy Space Center. And the particular desk that we're going to get is where the flight surgeons sit. So they're the people that sit and monitor the vital signs of the astronauts during a launch program. So that desk that they're sitting
with those desks.
You've seen Mission Control, or
the guys sitting there.
Exactly, it looks very much like that. So it's the firing room at Kennedy Space Center. The flight surgeons console will actually be a piece that's coming to our Space Science Center right here in Columbus. So we feel like these items are a significant advantage, obviously, for Columbus State University and for our facility, but not just for us, really for the entire community of Columbus, because anything that we can do to draw more people from out of town into the downtown area of Columbus really has a spin-off effect for the whole economy of Columbus in general. And we're extremely proud and happy to be a part of that whole effort.
Oh, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Can't wait. Now, did I hear when this would be here in Columbus, or do you know at this point?
We don't know, and we're only slated for these items, so we have to still see if they actually NASA uses up an engine cone or something. Then we may not get that. But the earliest they could come would be the January of 2011. So it won't be before that. We have about a year to go through the planning process and to find out really which pieces will definitely be coming to Columbus.
Okay. Wow. Now, last week you did mention something about a show coming.
We do have the Columbus Comic Book Show
coming
at the end of the month of February. In fact, it's the last day. It's the 28th of February.
Those Star Trek uniforms, etc.
Exactly. If you're a super geek out there watching the Education TV today, if you're a super geek out there and you collect comic books, or you have collectible action figures, or if you just like to dress up in Star Trek or Star Wars uniforms, or if you just have kids that would think that was all kind of a fun thing to do, on the 28th of February, bring them down to the Space Science Center, because the Columbus Comic Book Show is coming to our venue at the Space Science Center on the 28th. So if you want more information about that, you can just get on our website. There's a link right on the front page, and you can click on that and find out all the details of that event and what'll be offered there and what will be taking place. So Columbus Comic Book Show, February 28th at the Space Science Center.
Hey, Sean, this has been a great show. Every week you come in with a ton of news and some exciting announcements, and we appreciate it so much. This has been so much fun. I don't know if you can top this next week, but so you've done it each week, so I think I'm going to put my money there.
Yeah, I think you might have me on that one. It's pretty much hard to beat the $17 million worth of NASA artifacts coming to Columbus, but I'll do my best.
Hey, I love it. And I just want to say to our viewers out there, thanks so much for watching coehp.tv. And we get to hear Sean each week this time on our station, so we want to invite you to tune in next week at this time. And Sean, again, thank you so much for being with us.
No problem, Mike. Thank you.